is liquid medicine made from herbs. We're going to make some of that today. The difference between a tea and a tincture is that tea, you take your herbs and you pour hot water over them, let them steep for a little while, and you drink it, and then you can put it in the fridge and it'll last for a few days. But a tincture is made with something that is going to be able to last for a few years probably. So you're going to use something that will preserve it and make it so it's always ready whenever you need it. So how do you pick the herbs that you're going to use? It just depends on what you want to make this tincture for. You can make it out of one herb, you can make it out of a lot of herbs. Usually what I like to do is when I'm having an issue that I'm trying to deal with, I will get one of my books that tells about herbs, or I will get online and I'll kind of just do a little research, and I usually try to narrow it down to like 3 things to start with, because there's so many options for whatever issue it is that you're having. It's not like medicine that usually is like there's one pill for one problem. There are lots of herbs that will help with a single problem, and those same herbs will help with lots of other problems too. So I just like to kind of figure out what I think might work, and then one of the things I like to do is get onto Amazon and I look for that herb that's being sold there, and I'll read the reviews, and when I kind of like to look and see what other people's experiences were with herbs, so that I can kind of see if I'm heading down the right path or if I need to look somewhere else. So that's kind of my rough way of figuring out what herb I want to use for something. You can either buy your herbs online or from an herb store. You can use dried, or if you want to learn the plants that are growing in your own backyard, you might find out there's a whole bunch of stuff growing out there that you can use. So that's always an option. If you use fresh plants, it works just the same whether it's a fresh plant or a dry plant. So this procedure isn't going to be any different whichever way you decide to use. So what kind of a liquid do you use to make your tincture? I'm going to use some vodka, because alcohol, grain alcohol, is the best preservative and it gets the most good out of the plants. So that's what I like to use. But you could also use vinegar, or this is vegetable glycerin. I think it's made out of coconut. I'm not really sure. Anyways, vegetable glycerin also works. This is good for making tinctures for kids because it doesn't have alcohol in it, although you're going to get so little alcohol it doesn't really matter. But it also has a sweet flavor, so it kind of helps tinctures be more palatable for little kids. But anyways, I'm going to use vodka today. And what kind of a container do we use? I'm going to use this mason jar. Any kind of a jar is going to work. Anything that holds liquid and you can put a lid on, it's going to work. It doesn't really matter what size it is, or what color, or anything like that. Just any jar. I use glass, but I think plastic would be just fine also, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. I wouldn't put it in metal because it might react, like the acids in the liquid might react with the metal, but plastic or glass is going to be fine. How do you make a tincture? So let's go ahead and we will mix one up and I'll show you how it works. Alright, so I'm going to make a tincture. This is for urinary tract infections and bladder infections. This has been one that I made up myself and has worked so well, and we were just talking about that, so I thought I'd go ahead and make that today so you guys can see how it works. But this is going to be made with marshmallow root, astragalus root, and angelica root. And I buy my herbs at Mountain Rose Herbs, but there's lots of places online that you can get them. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab some of my herbs here, and I'm going to start putting some in this jar. I don't want my jar more than a quarter full because the herbs expand once the liquid starts to fill, or once they start to absorb the liquid. And I'm going to put roughly equal amounts of each kind of herb in here, although if you were making your own at home and there was one herb that you were mostly concerned with, you can make, a whole bunch of one kind and a little bit of another, or however you want to proportion it. Now the astragalus. So there, I've got all 3 kinds of herbs in the jar. We're just going to take our vodka. This vodka is nothing special. I found the very cheapest one that I could find. I'm going to put a lid on it. And then we're going to give it a shake. I usually let it sit for 2 weeks. You can let it sit longer than that, that's fine, but that's the general rule is 2 weeks. And I keep it somewhere dark-ish. And if I think of it, I shake it up, but I don't really pay too much attention to while it's sitting. At the end of 2 weeks, you are going to strain out the herbs. I use a strainer, something like this, and I line it with a wet paper towel so that, well, if I'm using powdered herbs, I line it with a wet paper towel to hold the, or to keep the grains of herbs from going into the tincture. But with something bulky like this that's not going to fit through the screen, then I just pour it right through into a new jar. When the tincture's all strained, it's going to look something like this. It's going to be a lot darker color, although it depends on what kind of herbs you use for what color it'll end up being when you're done. Then I put a label on the jar. You can use masking tape or whatever you want to write your label with. I use my little label maker because I like to do that. But then I keep this in my pantry where it's dark, or if you have dark bottles on hand, you could use those instead, but I don't, so I just put them in these little pizza sauce jars and keep them in the pantry where it's dark. So how do I take it? Well, with my UTI aid, I usually just take 1 dropper full in some water, and it clears up my problem very quickly. For the little guys that I made this for, I usually put that in some juice or something so that it tastes good, but you can take tincture straight in your mouth if you want to. They don't always taste very good, so it's kind of nice to put them in something else to drink. And generally you're supposed to go 3 times a day, but you can go more frequently if you feel like you need to, or less frequently, depending on what it is and if it's working or how quickly it's working for you. So how long will the tincture last? It should last a couple of years at least, and it's not going to hurt you if you take one that's getting old. It just won't be as effective. So if you take it after a while and you notice, this doesn't seem to be helping, then you might think, oh, it's been a while, I might need to make a fresh one. So that's also why I put a date on my labels, so I know when I made it and I can kind of estimate how useful it's still going to be. So I'm not an expert, that's just how I do it, and I like to share my practical skills with other people so we can figure things out, we can build our own houses, and we can grow God's kingdom together. You guys have a good day, and I'll see you next time.